How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the MSS The Bin Room podcast. We're here for episode 6, is it?
Episode 6,
Not
yeah.
too bad, not too bad.
Sheesh.
Considering most episodes or most podcasts don't make it past episode 3, or I think 90% of the rate doesn't make it
Yeah,
past
something like
episode
that,
3,
yeah.
we're now at double, so that's not too bad at
Let's
all.
go
Not too bad. So,
in the right direction.
oh, 100%, 100%. Today we're going to be kind of following up a couple of the things that we were talking about in the last episode. At the last episode, we ended it off by saying that we wanted to hear from you guys, that we wanted to hear people engaging with it, and we were really glad to see that people were engaging with the content. People did have their thoughts and opinions in the comment section. So we wanted to start today's episode by kind of just responding to some of those things and just kind of talking about some of the things that we saw in the comments. So someone made a really good point under one of the videos, and they were talking about this idea of, okay, let's say we like apples and you like oranges. Would it be compassion to make oranges illegal? Like, is it the right thing to do to say out of compassion that you're going to make someone else's choice illegal, or you're going to take away that kind of right to choice, right? So just kind of the first thing we would say is that kind of issue gets down to the idea of people's right to choose. And a really fundamental thing that people kind of forget when it comes to debating, or when it comes to like kind of pushing your views or your view of the world, is that everybody has the right to choose.
Facts.
And it's just because you think, or just because you, even in your heart, let's say you know that what you're saying is right, you don't have the right to take that right to choose from somebody else. That everybody has that opportunity. I mean, even if you thought about it, like if someone felt forced or like they're
Yeah.
trapped to have that view,
Yeah.
then like do they even have
You
that view?
have to have apple juice.
Exactly. Like you're not, even if you like, even the idea of just having your choice taken away and drinking that apple juice, you're gonna think it tastes awful. You're gonna be
Yeah,
bitter drinking it. You're
exactly.
not gonna want to drink it.
Yeah.
So no matter what your views are, or no matter what it is that you think, you have to give people the chance to think for themselves. People have to have the right to choose. And that's a really big thing that we were talking about in the last episode. That like one of the big things that we were standing on is this idea of, we feel a certain way, so we want to say what we think. But if you feel a certain way, you have every same right to say what you think as well. That's a really important thing, that people aren't feeling like they're slaves to other people's ideologies, that you're not allowed to just say, I feel this way, I'm going to take away your right to choose from you, but that you would give people the right to choose. And that's a really important thing. And we made the example in the last podcast when we were talking about a lot of the different things we saw in reality. And we gave this idea of, oh, just because you see someone drinking, let's say you saw someone drinking poison, or you saw that, let's say orange juice was really bad for you and you thought that it was bad for them and you wanted to take it away, that the orange juice in that situation didn't represent any particular movement or any particular idea or sin or anything like that, but that it represented just that kind of sin in general. And that doesn't mean that just because, like, one of the most controversial issues that we were talking about in the last episode, one of the biggest kind of topics of our time, is this idea of the LGBT movement, right?
Mm.
And orange juice in that scenario didn't represent that movement, but what
No.
it represents is anything that kind of falls into that category of sin, or like kind of outside God's will, and that can be murder, lying, stealing,
Anything.
anything at all. Like,
Anything.
and
Any sin that like you could possibly think of on that list.
that's orange juice.
Yeah.
So it's you can't just say, because like one of the most controversial issues is this, that I'm going to narrow it down to that particular issue. No, like there's no differentiation between murder or lying or stealing or killing or any of those kind of things. Like they're all the same kind of category. So when you talk about, like, like you might feel passionate about a particular issue, or you might feel that that's something that needs to be addressed or talked about, but you can't narrow down the conversation to that one particular issue. That in that metaphor, the orange juice represented everything that falls outside that kind of will. And one thing you'll really see as well is that if you were to list out all the things that are considered sin, you listed out all those items, you work your way down that list, you're going to find something that applies to you.
Yeah, facts.
Like, and I guarantee you'll find it pretty quickly as well. Like, it's not going to take you
Word.
too long.
On
Like,
that list too.
how many times a day do you lie? Or how many times in your life have you taken something that didn't belong to you? Or how many times have you, like, just even being angry at somebody, or like different kind of like unforgiveness or anything like that? That all those things fall into that category. So it's not even an issue of you can narrow it down to one particular issue that's controversial, or it's always in the news or in the media. That's just one particular thing. But what we're talking about here is that having the confidence and the courage to call out anything that might fall into that category, but also having the courage to say it applies to me too.
Yeah.
Like, are you perfect?
No.
Am I perfect?
Fuck no.
Far from it. Far from it. And I don't want this to be a podcast of, oh, we're gonna use our platform to call out a particular group of people, or to isolate people. It's like, absolutely not. Like, every single person has the right to choose how they want to live their life and what they want to do. Now, of course, like, there's going to be like, consequences. There's going to be certain like repercussions. Like, you can't have a system where everyone's just allowed to go out and murder and kill. And like
that's the purge.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're gonna have, like, when it comes to the idea of legality, they're gonna have like a certain like structure or kind of societal kind of order that you want to maintain, like a balance for people. But in regards to the idea of like people's mindsets and what they think, it's not right to tell people that they have to conscribe to a particular ideology, or they have to think a particular way. But the idea that you would present them with your alternative view if you really do believe in it and you really are convicted and have that kind of passion to say, this is what I believe, these are the reasons I believe it, and it's something we wanted to talk about. And we talk a lot about in the last episode about, you know, the idea of Jesus and the fact that like I'm Christian. I know you're still kind of figuring out your own situation, and everyone's like in the
Yeah.
situation of everyone's figuring out what they believe and trying to like adapt those beliefs and trying to figure out and refine it more. I mean, like to be in my own experience, to be a Christian is like the starting point, but then you like you realize that you have these like different assumptions about God, or you realize that it's like, oh, this is not what he does, or this is how it is. Like it's a learning experience fully, and it's something that like I feel like you'll be learning throughout the entirety of your life, whatever your views are. Like you'll always kind of like the more experience you get and the more kind of reality
If
you
you
like.
got like what 3 years on me,
uh
so like I'm still figuring stuff out.
like you're gonna like it's a situation of you'll always be learning and you'll always
Yeah.
be kind of figuring that out. But one thing we really wanted to just kind of like, you know, like say for sure is that to be an ambassador of Christ is supposed to be of love and compassion. That like you didn't see Jesus going around and like telling people, oh, you sinned, so you're evil and you're wrong. Like he didn't push those people away, and he wasn't coming down on those people. But the idea that through that love and compassion, being willing to talk to people, being willing to be in that community and be around these people, that you have to like there's so many things that differentiate us, and you see such massive issues like race or identity or like nationalities, whatever. Like there's so many like dividing lines, but it's all this like we're all people.
We're all human.
Like we're all human beings. We all experience life and like not in the same way, obviously, but we all like come from the same thing at the end of the day. You know
we
what I
all
mean?
just trying to live.
Like you can draw 1,000 different lines to differentiate ourselves, but there is more that we have in common than this like dislike. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So one thing we really wanted to kind of just reaffirm about the MSS podcast and about who we are is that regardless of what you believe, or regardless of who you are, or what you look like, or what you think, or whatever it might be, that we acknowledge that every single person has the right to exist, and every single person has the right to like live out their life and to find out what the meaning and the purpose of themselves are. Now, again, it kind of goes back to the issue of like, yes, there is the idea of right and wrong, and yes, there is an idea of what's important and maybe what doesn't matter, and like what's just pursuing pleasure and what's pursuing purpose. But like everybody needs to live this life and find out for themselves what that actually means. You know what I mean? And it never wants to be an idea of isolating people or saying like, I disagree with you, so you should stay over here, or I don't want you to talk about this issue or anything like that. Like people need to be able to feel like welcomed. I mean, think about how different you and I are, for example.
Oh my god, yeah.
Like we're aligned on a couple of like different things, and like we do this podcast, but like we're so different even in that kind of stuff as well. And we have a lot in common too, but like your differences complement my differences, and my differences complement your differences. Like when if you have everybody who's exactly the same, or everybody who's like identical, like each new person doesn't add a whole lot of value.
No.
Like having a bunch of people who are exactly the same kind of just keeps the linear. But
it's kind of funny because it shows in our style of like the way we're dressing right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm in like a fucking sweatshirt and you're in a shirt.
Like they're gonna have basic differences in different styles and preferences, but at the end of the day,
I think that's funny.
You're a human being and I'm a human being. You know what I mean? And like I love that too about the podcast. Like I love the idea that you and I aren't just like two identical people talking about like from a very niche point of view. It's like no, like you can have a balance. You can have different audiences. You can have different people that like you might come from a different background to me, but at the end of the day, like we're both human and we can both empathize with one another. We can both talk about stuff. You know what I mean? And like
that easy.
It's that easy. And even people you don't like or disagree with, like, you know, the idea of love your enemy, that understand that like, yes, you're going to draw those differentiating lines, and yes, you're going to be different, and yes, you're going to have like a lot of things that might not be in common, but you're still going to have a lot that is in common. You're still going to like, you're both fighting for the same thing. You're both fighting for that same purpose, for the truth, for what you care about, or for entertainment, or for pleasure, or whatever it might be. That there's just so much that like keeps us alike as well. You know what I mean? So even people you don't like, people you don't disagree with, or people you disagree with, you should still treat those people with respect and with kindness and compassion. Because if you disagree with them, like strategically, right? If you disagree with them, and let's say you wanted to win them over to your side and you wanted to convince them of a particular idea, right? Is your best bet to like treat them hatefully and to like push them away and to isolate them? Or is your best bet to treat them with compassion and to say, look, I understand who you are, and like let's talk about it, let's reason it out, let's have a conversation. I mean, how many times have you won a debate by being hateful and like by being like, oh, you're an idiot, you're stupid, like for thinking this kind of way? Like you're not gonna like push back.
Coming out of that situation as well, when you say those hateful things, you don't feel good afterwards. You don't feel like, oh, I accomplished a great debate. No, you feel even worse coming out of it.
Absolutely.
And just call this person like the height of names. Like
again, that's something we talked about in the last episode, that like name calling doesn't win debates. No. And this is another like really important thing that people need to kind of understand as well, is that when it comes to ideas, or when it comes to like ideologies, they don't have bodies. Like ideas don't have bodies. They don't have mouths to speak. They don't have like brains to think. all ideas have are representatives, and you get better representatives from people who have done the research, or who have, like, we'll say, thought in depth about what they're thinking about, or have like really come to understand the ideology and like embody that ideology. But all ideas have are representatives. So for ideas to engage with one another, for ideas to be able to kind of talk and to be able to like see which is better and to see which stands, like, the test of, reason and of thought, whatever, you need representatives of all the different ideas to come into the Colosseum of thought and reason and to be able to put those ideas to the test. Think about it, for example, as well. Like, let's say someone has an awful ideology, like for example, they're just like, they have this idea that's terrible and it's really bad, but they can't talk about it. They can't ever bring that idea to light. It just sits in their head and it just gets stronger and strengthened because they don't get any opposition. The beautiful part about when you have an idea and you bring it to that kind of Colosseum of thought is that people can engage with it. They can point out why it's wrong, and then you can respond to it, and then they can respond to that. Like, that's how ideas engage with one another. And if you have this idea of people can't bring their points of view, or people aren't allowed to talk, or they're silenced, no matter what that view is, you're only going to make it stronger in that person's head because they can't engage with you.
Yeah, facts.
So in order for us to get the best quality of ideas, we need people who are good representatives of those ideas to step up and say, look, it might be uncomfortable for people. They might not agree with what I'm saying. They might not like it, but I believe this. And if I'm not going to believe this, if it's a bad idea, I need you to tell me why it's a bad idea. I need you to be able to sit down and say, I've watched what you said. I listened to it. I thought about it. I really kind of chewed up the idea, and this is what I thought about it. And it gives me the opportunity to say, okay, maybe I was wrong. And I buy your argument. And then I can say, all right, I was brought to your side. But you can see, for that whole like journey to even happen in the first place, there has to be that compassion and that willingness to discuss things. If you're going to be like, oh no, I don't agree with you, so I hate you now.
If you're going to have a scream match for no reason, to not even get your point across, then what are you doing?
Absolutely.
Like, what is the point of even like
absolutely
coming to say something anyways if it's just hate, out of pure hatred?
And some people just like the sound of their own voice too. Like, some people just want to talk for the sake of talking as well. And like, that's something you kind of got to watch out for. Like you got to kind of like have the difference between kind of pride and compassion, because some people like want to start a podcast. They want to start like a platform so they can say, oh, I'm going to push out my own views and I'm just going to like talk and just kind of love the sound of my own voice. And that's something we don't really want to do on this podcast. That like, when people engage in the comment section, as we would encourage you to please continue to do, we would love to see the views of the people and to see what people are actually thinking out there in the real world, so we can say, okay, this is what you think. We're going to engage with that. We're going to talk about it. And you know what? There might be times when we're wrong.
Yeah.
Completely. Like, we could very much go on this podcast, have a full episode, talk about all these things, read something in the comment section that's like, oh, we didn't consider that.
Yeah.
And then we could be like, we'll come on the next episode and say, this person said this, we were wrong. And if there is a situation where someone has a really good point of view, they've thought about it more than we have, because we're not the like moral authority on what's right and wrong. Not at all. Again, we're just representatives and ambassadors of the thing that we think. So to have that kind of courage and integrity to say, look, I feel this particular way. It might not be like, what's the norm right now. It might not be like what's massively accepted, but we want to have the courage to say, you feel this way, I feel this way. Let's talk about it. And if we get proved wrong, that's the game. That is the game. And that's kind of having humility and like be able to say, like, I'm not perfect. I haven't thought about everything to the absolute bones of its construction, but I have this feeling, I have this talk, and I want to be able to discuss it with you. And if you beat me, you beat me. That's the game. Like, you're not going to win every fight. You're not going to win every whatever. No. But just so that we have the best quality of ideas, so that we can like think about things. And something as well I wanted to address as well is like, you have this idea of like allies, right? Like, there's this idea of like allies to different cause. On the MSS podcast, we are allies to the people. We are not allies to the cause or the ideologies or whatever. Like, our biggest concern isn't the ideas behind that we're representing. It's not the ideologies or the platforms, or whatever. It's the people. It's that the people get the best representation of ideas. It's that the people get the best opportunity to think about ideas, to be able to engage with different ideas, and to be able to just think about life in a perspective they might not have thought about it before. So that's the idea of like, we're allies to the people, and that if it means dropping our own ideologies, if you disprove me or if I disprove you, so be it. Who cares? But wouldn't it be nice to be able to pursue the truth?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice to be able to say like, oh, this is what the world actually is, and it might be hard to look at, and it might be uncomfortable, and it might not be nice, but wouldn't it be sick to be able to say we got a little bit closer to the truth? You know what I mean? And this is a big thing you always learn in debating too, is that you attack ideas, not people. And if you see people like with an idea and they're attacking other people, or they're saying, oh, you're stupid for this, or oh, you're dumb for this, that's hateful and that's bigotry. But if it's a situation of you honestly want to have genuine discourse and you're just going to say, I might disagree with you, but I want to hear you out, I want to hear your points, then that's, that's open debate, that's conversation. But to attack people and to say, oh, you have this ideology and I'm going to associate you with stupidity, or I'm going to associate you with just whatever it might be, that's hateful and that's bigotry in itself. So you don't aim it at other people, you aim it at the ideologies. So that's kind of that's one of the biggest things we wanted to talk about on
Yeah.
the podcast today, to kind of just be able to say that, like, look, this is where we are. And I know in our last episode we kind of talked about like a lot of big themes and kind of like
Yeah, yeah,
took a stance on a couple of different
yeah.
things, but we took that stance so that we could initiate this process of, okay, we've entered the Colosseum from this particular
Mm-hmm.
entrance. Now we're in the arena, we're in the pit, and you're going to bring your ideas, you're going to bring your ideologies, but those ideologies need to be able to meet each other in the middle, and they only do that when we represent the ideas. So
That's
I think hopefully you guys will engage further with the comments. And like, guys, it's so nice to be able to see that, even if you completely disagree with us, even if you think that, like, if we're over here and you're all the way over here, come tell us what the ideas, like, tell us what you
yeah.
think, tell us what you want to like talk about, because that's what we want to do. We want to facilitate that debate, that discussion, and we can only do that when you bring your ideas. So
Facts.
please continue to do that. Please continue to engage with the comments, not so that our rating and our subscription go up. We're the bin room. Like, we
We
don't
ain't good
care for the
about
lowest.
that.
The bin room is defined by having like the lowest ratings, but having the best conversations. And that's
Yes.
the spirit that we want to embody for this podcast and the platform. That, like, it might be a situation where we get proved wrong in front of the entire world.
No
I'll
problem.
tell you one thing: we'll have
I'll
the
take
humility
it.
to be able to say you were right.
Come
Like,
on, like,
we'll be able to say, like, look, if we get proved wrong, we get proved wrong, but we'll give you a good discussion for it. So,
yeah.
guys, we'll see you in the next episode, and we thank you for engaging with the podcast, and please continue to do that, and we'll see you in
Please.
episode 7.
Peace.